Star Wars is not in a good place with me right now. From the lousy handling of the sequel trilogy to the lousy handling of fans who criticize the sequel trilogy, Star Wars has just been a giant blah for the past few years. And about the only good thing left in Star Wars is the idea of Star Wars. Nothing has really stood out for me as far as Disney Star Wars is concerned, and the spin-offs have been only okay at best. Rogue One, it's okay. The original music for it didn't feel like Star Wars, and it was a real letdown. The story had no real point, and it didn't make me feel for the characters. After it was all over, the only takeaway from the film was that it looked nice, and the set pieces were cool. But whatever, lots of flashy nostalgia for a weak payoff, much like most of Disney Star Wars, and the less said about Solo, the better. This leaves us with the only good properties on the Star Wars franchise not ruined by corporate meddling: Rebels and The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian takes us on an adventure with an Old West vibe that, while it still has some flaws, is more in tune with what Star Wars is really about. It could fit neatly in with George Lucas's Star Wars universe. And yeah, I don't see new Star Wars as a real Star Wars, at least not anymore. Star Wars has become a hodgepodge of ideas and creators who have muddied the magic of what Star Wars is and should be about. Now, Star Wars is an action franchise, but with not much heart. The only remnant of traditional Star Wars that was left was Star Wars Rebels. I feel that this was a nice series that continued the story of the Clone Wars. It still had a charm that felt like Star Wars. It went a little off the rails, but all in all, it was a good series. The coming-of-age story of Ezra during the height of the onset of the Empire's rule was an interesting one, and it brought something new to the universe: Inquisitors. Now correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be, since there is a lot of original expanded universe out there that Disney has been picking apart for content, but Inquisitors are a new type of villain. These are Sith Force users hired by the Empire to hunt down the last remnants of the Jedi. Very cool idea. Regardless of how silly they use their lightsabers in Rebels, they brought a new dimension to the franchise other than yet another type of stormtrooper. But other than Rebels and The Mandalorian, there hasn't been a story-based game or series other than Battlefront 2's lackluster campaign mode. In comes The Fallen Order, the Rogue One of video game Star Wars, and a game that feels more like a side episode of Rebels than its own thing. Set after the events of Order 66 in The Revenge of the Sith, and before Rogue One and Rebels, you play as a young apprentice who has went into hiding and now works at a shipyard deconstructing the spaceships of the prequel trilogy. An accident happens, and he saves his co-worker by using the Force. This alerts somebody somewhere, and the Inquisitors show up. They find out that he's a Jedi, and now he has to run for his life. Saved by another Jedi, they fly off to other planets to find the remnants of Jedis who are still in hiding. The story is nothing to write home about. You don't feel like there are any high stakes, and you don't really care about the character that you're playing as. Everything is just kind of there, and honestly, I don't even remember anyone's name, except for the guest characters like Sol Guerrera. It's just one long episode of Rebels with a new character being chased by the Inquisitors. We've already seen this, so I don't know why it had to be redone as a video game. But for those that love the Inquisitors, and who haven't seen the show Rebels, it'll be new to them. They really are some badass characters, and every time they're on screen, it's a real treat. But the rest of the story kinda drags on. Its video game logic is plain to see right after the introductory level. As soon as you're hyped about what you can do and see in this world, with all these cool set pieces and graphics, you're plopped down in front of a menu deciding what planet you want to go to next. Why? Because we have to get these 3 MacGuffins in order to yada yada yada. The gameplay feels like everything we've played for the past 2 generations already, which isn't to say that it's a bad thing for people who aren't burnt out on it, but I think I'm ready for more possibilities in video games. Maybe the technology hasn't reached that point yet. Gameplay is a mixed bag of older games thrown into the Star Wars package. So you liked Uncharted and New Tomb Raider? Do you like their climbing and tomb puzzles? Well, you got that here. Did you like Sekiro and Dark Souls? Did you like parrying and sidestepping every other attack from enemies? You got that here too, even down to the cheap hidden enemies that attack you, and the meditation spots that respawns enemies after you've healed. This game is not a hack and slash like previous Star Wars games. Star Killer you are not, and if you try and go ham on stormtroopers or monsters, you will get wrecked. But if you play it methodically and learn the enemy's attack patterns, then you'll be able to take down enemies easily. Until you get swarmed by a bunch of enemies at once and the parry system is overloaded. Try parrying blaster fire from multiple angles while a Darth Maul looking monster is swinging his club at you. It's not happening. At least not at the beginning. You'll have to level up if you want to be a badass. And while leveling up is a chore, it doesn't take that long to do so. Defeat enough enemies and you'll have enough points to earn some new force powers and attacks that will help you fight. And finding enemies is easy if you're near a respawn meditation spot, although it will feel like a grind. So maybe this type of gameplay just isn't your cup of tea. Maybe you thought Dark Souls and Sekiro were just too damn hard and you missed the hack and slash of the older Star Wars games. I certainly missed playing Force Push Unleashed on the 360. So I was kinda disappointed in the gameplay of Fallen Order. Why should I have to sit there with each bland and repetitive enemy type just to grind it out to get more force powers that won't help you solve puzzles anyway? So I said screw it, ain't nobody got time for this, and put on the easiest setting, Story Mode. And oh boy, you'll be able to slice through enemies like a hot knife through butter. But that mode was a little too easy, so I went one mode up and it was perfect. Not too hard, not too easy. You didn't have to think about parrying crowds of enemies at once, and you could hack and slash to your heart's content. This isn't Force Unleashed levels of raw power, but you definitely will enjoy the game more if you really want to feel like a badass without the hassle of Sekiro type of gameplay. And that's not to say that Sekiro isn't a good game. It's one of the best games I've played this year, but it isn't for everyone, and in a Star Wars game, it can start to feel like padding, and the system in Fallen Order isn't as responsive as it was in Sekiro. Sekiro was just perfect in its execution, and it isn't here. And there's not much else I can say about the gameplay. Enemy types can become repetitive, but bosses and mid-bosses are imaginative and exciting. But some of the tomb puzzles aren't as intuitive as they should be. Finding your way through the map is a chore, and if you can understand Star Wars maps, I applaud you. I have never liked them in any Star Wars game. But thankfully, you don't have to have the map to remember where you are. I also don't like having the ability to choose which planets I want to go first, as there is an obvious order to the story. And finally, scanning everything doesn't amount to much, and finding boxes nets you items that are mainly cosmetic. But then, there are some boxes that will give you things that will really help you, like health packs for your BD unit. Hey, does every Disney droid have to start with the letter B now? So you'll basically be forced to open every box you find anyway in hopes of finding something useful. Graphically, the world is beautiful. Based on the Horizon Zero Dawn engine using Unreal Engine 4, the world created in Fallen Order feels like a high-production CG movie. I always make reference to Rebels because if all the cutscenes were shown on television, this would surpass the quality of any CGI show on TV today. It's that good. Everything looks so good and polished. The alien skin textures and even the stormtroopers and the Inquisitor's armors looks like they can actually be costumes from the films. The introductory level really wanted to wow you, and they succeeded in that regard. But since it is using Unreal Engine 4, expect a lot of pop-in in larger worlds and some frame rate stuttering when you reach a new area in the game. The skin textures on humans, on the other hand, are very soft, and sometimes the hair textures are a little aliased and jaggy. I would have expected sharper textures on humans, considering the alien skin textures were so detailed. And why is she always modeled like this? Her eyes aren't that huge. Come on, developers. Every game she's in has her with these huge eyes. It's weird. Her eyes aren't that big. And I feel the Wookiees in this game are too skinny or something. Maybe they need more hair. They just look weird. But anyway, motion capture and lip sync are very well done here. Unless you hit a stutter between cutscenes. That's when the voices become out of sync. And believe me, you will hit a stutter during cutscenes. This game is littered with stutter, even with the patch, at least on PC. But when the voice and animation are synced correctly, it's perfect. The actors deliver their lines well, but much like the rest of the story, it's just okay. Try as they might, the direction is a little flat, and you don't feel the tension or threat of the Empire like they want you to. And I'm a little disappointed that there wasn't as much alien languages in the game. Every main character speaks English. I guess that's a Disney thing or whatever. I mean, at least give them an accent, just to make them sound different than a regular human. As for sound, the world is filled with the usual effects and atmosphere that you've come to expect from Star Wars. It really sounds like a big budget film. The only drawback is that the surround sound just didn't feel like working on my computer. The back channels were working, but it only repeated the sound of the front channels. So it could be due to my old system or my PC, but other games have no problem with surround sound, only this one. So I'm not sure how it is on consoles, so I can't comment there. But even with these limitations, the sound effects are crisp, the atmosphere of Lonely Tombs are eerie, and the enemies' grunts and growls are menacing. But I don't really have to talk about sound and graphics too much anyway. This is a big budget game, and that's what you should expect. Had it not been an exemplary experience, it would have been something to write about. Graphics and sound are top notch, and you won't be disappointed. So, is it worth buying? Yeah, it's a good game, but the story isn't amazing, and it doesn't have much replayability unless you want to challenge yourself on the harder difficulties. So in my opinion, I say wait for its sale if puzzle solving and technical combat aren't your thing. But remember, it gets much more like an action game on easier settings. So you won't have to worry about the game being unenjoyable regardless of your skill level. So if you like Star Wars, picking up this game is an easy decision.